just kind of giving in, then he somewhat passes the buck and says, all right, well, if Trotsky can, I think that was Cropsey. I'm sorry, Trotsky. Yeah.
Cropsey.
We can stick an axe in his back.
You really
we'll be
are
all right,
deep, Jamie, really deep.
Yeah, Cropsey, who was a well-known, war on drug dude in the House, and he became part of Schuette's team to work on this issue, and of course, he was selected specifically because of his anti-stance. That was the point. Schuette's always been an obstructionist on this, obviously, and that was part of it, to have a group to handle that. And Cropsey was there. And so Jones passes the buck and says, look, all right, so if you can get Cropsey, in the Attorney General's office to go along with this, we'll see what we can do. She's like, Cropsey? I watched him grow up. He lives a couple houses down from me. I'll go talk to him tonight. So this was Helen Pryor, the old lady whose testimonial moved Jones to try to pass the buck a little bit. What he didn't know was that she fully was aware of and had a great relationship with the guy he didn't think was able to be convinced. But they went over there, and by the time he left, Cropsey's wife is crying and everything, and he says, all right, let's do this. And that wasn't a go-ahead for policy. That was just a go-ahead just to introduce the bill. And that's when Colton felt comfortable to introduce the bill. So we can thank Helen Pryor for her part in all of this.
Yeah, it was a good bill at the time, and let's just reflect for a minute what it looked like and what it sounded like, because I think it was a time when I think more people. I mean, if you were going to take a divided medical cannabis community, for all the reasons why they would think about wanting to fight with each other, there was less of that over this issue than there is of the existing legislation that people are working with under. That's because there was even a. Was there a? I know there was a unification of the various organizations, which rarely happens. It has in a few cases. I think one of them was opposing some of the bills in the 2011 legislative. Was it the amendments of 2011, the Walsh bills or whatever, which produced the bona fide relationship and that outdoor grow, but not as bad as it was. That was a time I think everyone came together. I remember a letter being signed. The second one. Maybe there's another one in between there. But this was definitely one where there was an agreement for the legislation to go forward, which included dispensaries contingent upon. Josh, do you have a guess? I'm going to let Josh from the back row guess. The original legislation that we are now representing people for involved what? As the original, that is not as the original introduction of the bill or as it was intended or as written, does nowhere reflects as it was enacted into law in 2016.
What? This is in relation to which part of it?
Just in general.
The 2011 Act.
No, it's 2014. There's a bill that was on the floor, lame duck, with a promised vote that was going to take place. It involved very specific legislation, been vetted. A lot of people in this room paid went to parties for people that they don't like and normally would never vote for.
Yep.
So this could take place. They were promised that a vote was going to take place, and it was promised. That's up next. They lame duck because that's how they operate in the dark in Lansing.
And then Michael Bouchard called.
It was worked on for 2 years. It was vetted to the point where there was a promised vote. It doesn't get played to any more exactness. As this very proud and open and transparent government casts its vote on the floor of the House or the Senate and comes together, they don't do that. They wait till the lame duck when no one's looking and they're leaving office in a week or two. That's what took place. So I'm describing the scenario. That bill that was promised to be voted for.
2 years.
It's much different.
2014, Josh. Just one guess.
Come on, Josh.
It was much different, Josh. Completely different.
You were still wearing diapers then. It was 2011. Just kidding. You weren't even like a.
I wasn't wearing diapers. I was 11. I was definitely wearing diapers.
I mean, it seems like a long time ago. It does. I think about you're really, okay, he's young. That's what I can say.
I know.
What?
I mean,
The source from where the cannabis may be coming from was going to be where.
the caregivers.
Right. And that was the only way it could ever be agreed upon. Like, why create another
That
mechanism?
was a line, man.
You did well. You did well, Josh. It was a terrible question. I pulled you out of the back row. I didn't, what?
Sitting there and I was thinking that it had to have been some sort of caregivers caregiver-centered
Right.
type idea.
I could have made it easier.
And
Said
it
like
just became more regular.
even
But
Chad
then you
was in favor
started
of that.
floundering.
Even Chad was in favor of that. Then it would have been a first.
Floundering is bad.
Political expedience. I can explain it.
That lame duck was rough. It was Jamie was there.
He signed his name to it. Did he say no? He
sucked.
signed his name to it
Was
and
really
encouraged
bad.
others to as well.
The 11th hour barrage by the Sheriff's Association.
Hold on, stop for a second before we talk about how it got shut down, what it was and what it was supposed to be, just so we can reflect for a moment and contrast with the existing
Breathe.
laws as they are.
Again.
Jamie, do you want to tell us what it was supposed to be? That the bill that later turned into,
Well, it had changed a lot from the beginning at that point, but yes, it did still contain the supply chain coming from the
existing
caregiver
caregivers.
system, which was significant. That was
Full
a line at the
inspections
time.
also full inspections.
There were and testing was added and other shit too, but it still maintained. It still would have been
Would
pretty
have been
awesome
better
in
than what's
comparison to-
there now.
But transportation restrictions.
Let me ask something. Does anyone have and there's always been there's been attempts. Some groups have fought harder than others for what might be described as a, philosophical change to the MMA to try to, get a better flow. One might say. Jamie, one obviously is moving in a direction of dispensaries, opening up, as the legislation would have allowed for caregivers to have a source to unload their overages and put them on the map and be able to, because at that time you got people that are caregiving that, caregiving system is an honest, noble work that's challenging without any reward. And if the law enforcement wants to mess with you, they can mess with you. And if you're making money, then they can mess with you also if they find out. Just very challenging. I'm not knocking it. It's noble. And one could argue that it didn't get a chance to develop because there was alternatives at the time which weren't one could argue weren't the original. But at the end of the day, I'll fight with anyone who wants to with me about this. People want to make money, and we live in the United States of America, and we're born into a capitalist society where we will pay to make money for our own selfish needs at the expense of others, and it all happens all over our country. So no one is going to be criticized for, and if you want to criticize people, you can. And I'm just saying, though, it's a reality that was going to happen. It's going to go in that direction. And people are going to rise, fall, and try to. It's going to be driven by capitalism. That's how they're born. We're not in. So I think that's just part of all that. And I know there's a question or a reason why I'm saying all this.
What do you think of the upcoming?
Wait.
You got to talk
Wait.
into the microphone.
Wait. Hold on. So Jamie, the bill allowed for the caregivers to draw, and then describe it if you recall, if you have any specific memories of the events as they were voted or not voted upon. Being in Lansing, what happened, how that went down.
Well, there was a huge expectation that it was finally going to come to pass. And there was a 11th hour barrage by the Sheriff's Association and others led by Bouchard. And it's my understanding that the sponsor of the bill, Eileen Kowal, state representative, felt pressured into backing out and pulling the bill. And people wondered, hey, when's this vote coming up? Oh, yeah, well, she pulled it.
Yeah.
And then that was it.
Out of session, shaking.
Oh, yeah.
And Robin called up, what's his
But
face?
she get a
from
microphone.
NPR and said, hey, why don't you call up Eileen Kowal and ask her what Michael Bouchard said to her to make her pull her vote. It was very specific.
She was visibly shaking, Charmy
Visibly
says.
shaking. You can hear it on the interview
She
that
had-
she had with Jake Nearing.
She had a very sick
She
child
was
from her
scared.
district that came into her office and had a seizure on the floor of her office, and
Yeah.
that was why she sponsored the bill. And she pulled it. She pulled it at the last minute, and that is the type of shit that you deal with in Lansing.
Well, she said, he'll ruin my career.
Yep.
She was talking about Michael Bouchard, and
And-
Robin said, no, I'm going to because you promised these
Robin
children's
was
parents
pissed. She
that
was
you were going to
pissed.
help them.
She was in tears, and Robin really fought really hard for that bill. And I know that we were all very upset when 5104 died.
It was a coup. It was a complete coup. Years went into that bill, and in a couple of phone calls, it's the Michigan State Police calling all their legislators. They killed a lot of drug policy reform that year. that night. They killed almost all of it. I don't know of anything that got through that wall, the blue line like that, because we have a real lobbying cabal of law enforcement up there.
And that was after all the bullshit we had to go through. I mean, remember how long it took us to get the frickin' bills out of GovOps? It took forever.
With sick children as the
Yes.
face of it.
It was horrible. And then to have it die like that was just it's really, really sad.
And these are the same guys that Michael's fighting in the courtroom every day.
Yeah.
How do you do it every day?
It's a great question.
Different branch of government.
No, they really. It's kind of. They don't really. They're not really into it. They're not as into it as I am.
But Michael, how do you do it every day? How do you go into the courtroom every day? Every time I'm in the courtroom with you, the cops lie on the stand. You catch them again and again and again. The prosecutors lie. How do you go into the courtroom every day and do that?
Because he's awesome.
No, it's.
Seriously, like, what does it take?
Mostly awesome. But
You know why? What was that? Where was that thing that we Jeffrey wrote
He
down
doesn't
before
like
the?
He's
You
impassioned.
know what? I tell you why. Because
He's committed.
Yeah.
It's commitment.
It's a job. I'm fortunate that I have a job that is that the Constitution recognizes. It puts me at task to like protect something that the Constitution, it's part of it. I don't know. Not a lot of jobs get to do that. So I figured that out today. Me and Jeff are thinking about that. That's my answer for the day.
he's a dragon.
But it takes a lot of. I mean, you have to be able to release. You have to be able to let it. You have to be able to leave it somewhere and go home and make Play-Doh. Probably that helps.
I rub my hand through Chad's hair. Look at that.
We're gonna start.
Or pull it out. I'm like.
Yeah.
Love badminton.
So I'll throw in an aside here while we're kind of
Because it's so much
getting off base. Unless are you about ready to say?
We are off base.
So,
Hold on. Time out.
We're way off base.
What?
We gotta have a throat singing break soon.
That's kind of.
Oh yes, of course. Let's
like Susie
do
Throat
that.
singing.
No,
And we can,
let Jamie talk.
I bet.
Jamie, you want to say something?
Well, the Eileen Kowal
I'm sure Ray
discussion
can do
reminded me. So the Eileen Kowal discussion reminded me of seeing her a few months ago at the North Oakland County Republican Club, NORC.
That sounds about right.
We told them that it sounds too suspiciously close to NARC.
There's like dork and narc.
So Senator Kowal did a presentation on online gambling, and I did a presentation on legalization. And there's a straw poll at the end, and there's about 75% support for legalization and that kind of stuff. And that's
Online gaming, just for those that were listening
about
to the story.
45% support
45,
for
okay.
online gaming. But
What about marijuana while gaming? Is there
that
any,
did not
any
come
data
up.
there?
But
No,
75%
Jim, do the math.
support for it.
100%
like,
are in
Yeah,
favor
as long
of
as
that.
gaming's legal, doing it with cannabis was okay with that group. In whatever way you want to do it. But just here's the thing: April 26th, the same club that I've helped to get this organized is sponsoring a debate with Scott Greensley, of course, who represents the only real current.
Oh, he's the one that went
opposition.
out and publicly got the gun because he said he was being
Yeah.
threatened by
Healthy
the
and
marijuana
Productive
community.
Michigan or something like
Right,
that.
yep.
So he's going to debate John Truscott of Truscott Rossman, which is the PR firm for the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. So that will be an interesting evening, and
Let's
that's
just debate
that's
who
open to the
against
public.
who?
It's at the
Who
pu-
against who?
It's going to be Scott Greensley, this healthy and productive Michigan guy who got $150,000 from Sam.
Aw.
Smart approaches to marijuana. Kevin Sabet.
Kevin Sabet hooking it up.
And John Truscott, partners in Truscott Rossman, the well-renowned public relations firm, the professional public relations firm of the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. So my money's on John. And we set him up to do this because he's representing the coalition and because he's very credible to that particular group.
Isn't it true you've camps set up all over the state of Michigan for activists to come and train, like an MMA camp, like they can take on the Jamie Lowell Jiu-Jitsu of fighting medical cannabis?
There's some underground activity.